You might think this was just another ordinary workday in the Senate, but what unfolded that day would be remembered for years to come. A hearing initially focused on climate policy, and the Green New Deal Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez shocked the chamber when she suddenly turned the spotlight into a personal attack on Senator John Kennedy. She mocked his Southern demeanor, calling him a joke right in the middle of a nationally televised session, but Kennedy's reply was not just a defense, it was a masterclass in composure, intelligence, and classic American grit. What followed captured the attention of every lawmaker, journalist, and citizen watching across the nation. The Senate chamber grew tense. As if holding its breath, AOC stepped forward, and her voice rang out commanding and unwavering. "Dear colleagues," she said, eyes scanning the room before locking on Kennedy, who sat calm, arms crossed. She spoke of storm's destruction and death tying them to inaction, and then accused Kennedy of trivializing it all with his folksy humor, likening him to a carnival act not fit for serious discussion. The room grew colder. Her words pierced the air, and the younger progressive senators let out faint chuckles, but most present shifted uncomfortably. Not all were pleased by her tone. AOC then pointed at Kennedy and declared that in this debate he was not funny, but a joke in the most damning sense. Reporters began furiously typing, cameras zoomed in, yet Kennedy remained motionless, expression neutral, as if absorbing every word without flinching. This only emboldened AOC further. She pressed on, talking about economic inequality, pollution, flooding in the Bronx, and claimed the Southern wit was useless against the urgency of their time. Scattered applause came from her side, but unease crept in. A neutral senator shook their head, and even one of AOC's own aides seemed conflicted by how personal the attack had become, sensing her momentum. AOC advanced again, her voice slicing the air, passion evident, but bordering on combative. Kennedy, still motionless, tilted his head ever so slightly, hands tapping rhythmically. His confidence unnerving his opponents. His composure became a spectacle itself. A reporter whispered that she had awakened a sleeping storm. AOC, unaware of the brewing counterforce, continued calling for bold action and suggesting that Kennedy step aside. If he had nothing meaningful to offer, she sat down, her speech complete, her stare unrelenting. But Kennedy took his time. When he finally cleared his throat, the soft sound silenced the room. His voice, slow and firm, rose with a Southern charm, but carried the gravity of experience. He said he came from a place where yelling wasn't proof of being right, and that he went to the best schools not for show, but to understand that substance must weigh more than sound. His words settled over the room like fog, sobering and undeniable. Even his political opponents leaned, and then came the pivot. He agreed on the need for action, but warned that action must be practical and not paid for by those already struggling with life's burdens. This was not a man dodging a debate, but a man redirecting it. AOC jumped back and accusing him of ignoring the suffering of people in vulnerable communities, describing wildfires, polluted air, and climate refugees. She painted vivid images, hoping to shatter his calm, but Kennedy simply stood slowly, his presence commanding, and said softly that he had seen storms firsthand, and that what his people needed were not pretty slogans, but grounded policy. His voice, low yet firm, drew subtle applause, and his message reverberated through the chamber. Even AOC's staunchest allies began to quiet. Kennedy's rebuttal struck like lightning, not loud, but deeply felt. AOC once more took the floor, reminding everyone that delaying action was another form of failure, and that the Green New Deal was no fantasy, but a survival plan. She said if he couldn't keep up, he should step aside, and with that she sat, her fire still burning. But Kennedy simply smiled, not mockingly, but as if he knew the tides had begun to turn. His calm had unsettled the storm around him. Reporters typed faster, realizing this exchange would dominate headlines. Aides whispered to senators, predicting the ripple effect across the nation. AOC, still resolute, leaned forward, her voice cutting through the rising tension, ready to take the confrontation to its peak. She knew the nation was watching, and that this moment was bigger than policy. It was personal, political, and symbolic of the clash between old and new resolve in rhetoric, substance, and performance. And as the cameras captured every breath and stare, the chamber transformed from a hearing into a historic showdown with no winner yet, but every viewer choosing a side in real time. The podium felt like it was holding back a storm as AOC leaned. Non expected John Kennedy, aului the image of compass, to suddenly rise and confront Adamsche directly, kitchen hima uguart and leaving the room change as Jasmine cricket coart slept out with orte ort. The evening had been orchestrated with precision, crafted to leave a lasting impression. Outside, the White Stone Council, the National Conference Center in Washington, D.C., rosy-like sentinels glowing under soft uplights, a modern temple of power and persuasion. But this isn't a gala for all cheap patrons to sip your wine in peace. IT was een politieke machine in motion, een fundraising gewend drawn wie ze deliberate strokes of een campaignstrategische plan, in wieting onder ze jeletje, zijn influential en ze useful. Inzet ze whole, binnen de facade of refinement, calculations unfolded vis-a-vis handshake and ord exchange de. Chief's team had prepared this night like a battlefield discipline, guarded and weaponized with charm. Attendees included tech moguls, if senators, fading celebrities trying to stay relevant, enter Terum, Jasmine Crockett, paced in a silver gray dress, beautiful body stunt, her mind clearly elsewhere to 10, we toward ceremony, John Kennedy entered the room. No entourage. No tricks just a quiet hours of presence in a sharply tailored navy suit that demanded no flash to clarament attention. Mere rippled. Someone near the bar asked if he was a son and answer. He said nothing, moved to a table near the front, and calmly observed, which is a sharp, what he is supposed to steal. Chief's camp had invited him, maybe as a statement, maybe as bait, but no one had expected him to actually come, let alone sit in silence airman the noise and page until his con stage, should have navigated the crowd like a seasoned performer, shaking hints, receiving praise, busking in applaus that sometimes seemed a little too enthusiastic. He was called a hero, Keuren per Roosevelt, celebrated with rehearsed admiration, but underneath the gleam of the chandeliers, tension homed like a rigito snapper. IT was a kind of unease that didn't scream at you watched, IT listened, IT waited. Kennedy felt IT instantly. This room was less about honesty and more about power disguised celebration, just before dinner. As grilled salmon was served on power slim plates and artificial laughter flight through the air, Kennedy's attention sharpened. A woman in a red dress had slipped a comment into the rigid of performance. Hurley was Hala, drawing attention to herself like a badly written scene. Across from Kennedy, a former banker leaned over and greeted him with a friendly but carefully measured smile, hinting at ideological difference while cloaking KT in civility. Kennedy returned the gaze calmly and said only that he was surprised to be there too. He wasn't interested in sparring Krassil Dvorkst, Ktenshev took the podium. The room settled into silence as he spoke with the calculated energy of a man who had delivered the speech 100 times, but tonight he was more raw, more aggressive. He declared that America needed winners, not who winners, and said he didn't care about political correctness or who got offended. He spoke in broad strokes, casting shadows in every direction without naming names, but it was obvious who he meant. Kennedy's presence was like an open tap no one wanted to close to 10. Without any prompting, Kennedy stood. He hadn't planned to speak, but something inside had shifted. IT wasn't rage, it was resolve. She had invited him into the arena, and Kennedy would not back down. She saw him and mocked him gently, daring him to respond. Kennedy didn't take the bait, he took the flower. Command Keuren passed. He called out Chief's words not as bold, but as hollow. He said he had come to listen, not to grandstand, but since it began dragged into the spotlight, he had no choice but to speak. America didn't just need two winners. He said it needed honesty, humility, and courage. He called out Chief's habit of targeting groups from behind the city of donor vendetta Palaus, and the room fell into silence so the team of even the clink of wine glasses of CHF3 to wire back. It is voice sharper now, calling Kennedy's presence a circus act, accusing him of ignorance, or benefiting from the very system he criticized. But Kennedy stood firm, unmoved, which is silence more powerful than Chief's crescendo of fury. When he finally spoke again, he did so without raising Kitchi's voice. Since that of unbuilt a movement, he had built a brand, one that so